Can everybody hear me? Hey, tribe. It's great to see everybody. And I'm actually really grateful that you've also let an outsider, some conservationist, some NGO type, join the tribe a few years back. And it's a real pleasure to be here with everybody. I am going to talk about this issue of conservation travel. And the theme of the summit is the economics of adventure travel. And I can tell you, I am no economist. I'm in fact a redneck from Alabama. And I will start talking about my accent real fast in just a moment. But I do know that the issues of supply and demand, and that's what we're going to talk about. So I'm not an economist, not really sure what I'm really good for, although last night I did learn I had one talent, and I intend to continue to improve on it, and practice makes perfect, right? So the issue of supply and demand. It's one of the most basic principles of economics, and it's also a basic principle for our industry. And nature gives us an incredible supply of magnificent places and phenomena that our clients, our customers, our travelers demand. These wild and teeming oceans, that's what our customers want to explore. These incredible, lush forests and vibrant, pulsing streams are exactly what our clients want when they want adventure. Nature gives us that. Nature is our supply. And we can't, you're going to get sick of the tiger, but you can never get sick of a tiger. We're going to talk a lot about him today. Some of the most magnificent wildlife spectacles on the planet are exactly what we need to have the business thrive. And there's a lot of demand for it. And we see that demand growing year on year on year, faster than any other part of the tourism sector. But that supply has got some other demands. Unfortunately, it's got some demands that are competing against our demands, that are competing against our own interest. Sometimes that supply is for something as small as an ivory trinket, and that is jeopardizing each and every one of our businesses. I don't mean to gross anyone out. I don't mean to disappoint you or depress you, but we have to face a fact. The supply on our resource is in serious trouble, and it's up to us to solve that problem.
The Earth is an incredibly complicated place. When you look at the whole world, the forests, the oceans, the rivers, the climate, it is all connected. And it all supports this glorious array of life and us at the same time. And we are slowly, inexorably destroying what is our home. And if we don't take care, the only nature we're going to know in this world, we're going to visit like museums. It's going to be people standing in line to pay some money to enter a park and see what the world used to look like.
So, I'm giving you some facts. This is not hyperbole, although I often accuse my CEO, a dear friend of mine, of hyperbole. It's not hyperbole. There are real data that show that right now, the way that we're using the resources on the planet is completely outstripping what the planet can continue to rejuvenate for us. In fact, what that graph means is that we need not one Earth, we need 1.5 at this point. If you put all the resource use that we have, we need 1.5 Earths, and last time I checked, we've only got one. This is the last depressing figure I'm going to give you if I haven't woken you up yet. This is a graph of wildlife populations. It's an index that brings all the species, everything out there, fish, big cats, elephants, it brings it all together. And it looks at how they're doing. And unfortunately, from this report called the Living Planet Report, which is a science-based report, comes out regularly, the last time we did it, we got it wrong. We thought that wildlife populations had decreased 36% since the year 1970. We had it wrong. It's 52%. And that, some of you might have seen that in the news this past week. It was heavily covered. We have lost more than half of the population of all wildlife species on this planet since the year I was born in 1970. How many of you have kids? It's kind of tough to stomach that. When I think about the year I was born and now we've already lost half of it, but the good news is, even though in a lot of parts of the world, nature isn't worth more alive than dead, we know there's some answers. We know that this, however, these problems are simply, as Nikki said, not good business. So now let's turn the tables. I don't go to bed at night super depressed. I go to bed at night with hope. And a lot of that is because of you, of this industry. Because what you do is you create worth for wildlife. You make wildlife worth more alive than dead, and you make it compete with other land uses that don't work for nature and don't work for people. That gives me hope. And in essence, each and every one of you has been doing your own part, because you're part of this industry of adventure travel, to take the conservation travel approach. And that's what we're going to talk about today. WWF and ATTA, with many of you who are on the ground doing the job, have developed this concept of conservation travel. Sustainable tourism that's connecting the traveler to nature and supporting its protection. That's the key part, supporting its protection, because we can't sit by the wayside anymore. We need to sustain the resource that sustains our business. Think of it, how many of you buy some sort of insurance? Either it's for your traveler, for your business, you've got some sort of insurance, right? This is an insurance scheme for the long-term future of your business profit. Now, how many of you had the great joy of visiting a place called Namibia last year? Raise your hand. So in Namibia, we got to see what this looks like when it scales up. And yes, Namibia is a place that's not heavily populated, doesn't have some of the pressures on, but I can tell you there would be elephants poached right, left, and center in Namibia if it weren't for you, for the adventure travel industry that is incentivizing local communities to value their wildlife. It's an extraordinary tale. It's a place that many of us experienced on bike, on foot, by boat. We spent time in these incredible vistas, and Namibia offered us so much. And one of the things it really offered us was a chance to see a model at scale across the country where communities, these incredibly diverse cultures and communities, were part of a solution. They owned the wildlife, and the future of nature was in their hands through these communal conservancies. Now they could decide to take it all and sell it off and sell the ivory. That was not what they chose to do. They chose to save that wildlife and make it work for them. And that's because you guys incentivize it. It's an incredible story that has actually led to a phenomenal recovery of wildlife. And it shows us what can happen in many other parts of the world. It's empowered people. It's actually helped the health of communities, the education of communities. It's given them jobs. And they all know that comes from their wildlife. It's a direct connection in their heads. If I lose my wildlife, I'm losing money, I'm losing a hopeful future, and that's not good business for them. And again, it's all because of adventure travel. Now, I will pretend to know a little bit about economics momentarily, that if you look at, in any of these conservancies, the number of species that they have in places that used to be wiped out of their wildlife. If you have more species, you make more money. It's quite simple. If you're a scientist, you don't get a better correlation than that. But it goes even beyond that. We know now from 20 years of experience that if you add any new wildlife species to your communal conservancy, but through adventure travel, you're now getting an extra $2,100 into your community. If you got the big five, that's $22,000 on average. Your poor community is now bringing in year on year because of adventure travel. If you've got a black rhino, it's $110,000 to some of those poor communities that many of you had the pleasure to meet and spend time with. That makes wildlife worth keeping it alive. And now it's led to this incredible recovery. 2 years ago, when we were in Lucerne, Keith Spruill and Maxie and Sam, people were walking around with T-shirts that said 42%. Do any of you remember that? They had these big white T-shirts that said 42%? Because that was the number of how much of the percent of land that had been conserved in Namibia because of this incredible model. We can't keep the maps updated fast enough because the adventure travel industry is growing there, and the benefits to the communities and the benefits to wildlife conservation continue to grow. It's 44% now. We now have 81 conservancies with several more in the wings. And so this concept of conservation travel works. It's powerful, and many of you are doing it yourselves. Everywhere, whether you're bringing people to North America, whether you're outfitting them, whether you're writing about the travel industry, whether you're bringing them to Asia, whatever your role is in the industry, you're doing this. And so one of the things we want to do, and we're going to be doing during this week, is taking this concept and making it real. Conservation travel essentially has 3 outcomes, and one is to incentivize the conservation impact, influence the traveler, and the third is to invest in conservation. And these are going to be the 3 things we're going to talk about that Praveen and Julian are going to share with their experience. And on Thursday, Ted Martens and Amit Sankala are going to share with you some more examples of how they're doing their part in this framework, these 3 I's, if you will, to make conservation happen through their business. So impact is really about incentivizing conservation impact. You've seen that in Namibia. By choosing itineraries that involve communities, by making sure that people are getting benefit, those who hold the fate of nature in their hands, that's part of what we can do to have a direct conservation impact and change the way that stakeholders view the future of that wildlife. Second is influencing the traveler. You have a captive audience, sometimes literally. And what you do with that audience before the trip, during the trip, after the trip, how you write and communicate about places, that's influencing the traveler. And not just educating them, it's also engaging them. Whether it's getting them to become a WWF member or getting them to get engaged with a local campaign, you get the chance to engage them probably in a way that no one else ever could because you are giving them the inspiration of their life. So influencing the traveler is something we need to do, continue to do, and we need to keep doing more of it. We have to do more. And the invest piece is absolutely critical. Investing in conservation priorities. It means we have to take care when we do have philanthropy that's coming from your business or from the traveler. We have to take care to put it in the right places to the conservation priorities. But there's more that we can do, and there's creative ways that we can take money that was in the supply chain or money that was outside the supply chain and ask people to give more to support the places that just gave them the memories of their life. Whether it's protection, direct protection of some of these species that are in great peril from things like wildlife crime, like elephants and tigers and rhino, whether it's empowering local communities to protect their own wildlife and nature in their backyards, or whether it's looking a little more deeply in what nature needs. So in places like India and Nepal, where you need to make corridors for these tigers to continue to grow their populations, how can we invest locally in a place that matters to us to reforest corridors, work with local communities to make sure that tigers have that freedom to roam? Those are just the kinds of projects that we can have a direct impact on. There's money to be had, it's good for business, and we need to be investing in these conservation priorities, if only as an insurance scheme. Now, none of this is easy. If it were easy, we would have been doing it because we all have good hearts. But actually, the real innovators on all this is not some bozo from WWF. The real innovators are you guys. Each and every one of you has some story about either something you're doing to have impact or influence or invest, or something you aspire to do. And so we're going to spend some time this week continuing to innovate on these 3 elements of conservation travel because it is the future of our business. Doyle said last night that we are all pioneers, and that's exactly what we are. And I hope we look back 10 years from now, look back at this summit, and think about how we began to pioneer and to completely indoctrinate something called conservation travel into the way that we do our business. whatever your role in the business might be. And that's why in a little bit, we're really excited to be able to formalize a partnership between ATTA and WWF to help you do that. It's one thing to talk and pontificate on a stage. It's another thing to make it happen and to help you do the things that you want to do in your own context. WWF, many of you know us. We're the world's largest conservation organization. We work in almost all the places where you travel to. We have 5 million members, a brand that is known as it's the equivalent of Coca-Cola in terms of the environmental world. That's powerful. Now, how do we use that to get more travelers to do conservation travel, to build the business of conservation travel? That's what we're committing. And then, of course, ATTA brings a lot. ATTA brings you. ATTA brings a convening power. ATTA brings people with the spirit and the drive and the passion to not only enjoy these places and to promote the enjoyment of these places, but to also save them. And so this couldn't be a better partnership. And we all miss Shannon, wish he was here with us. So, partnership goals. First of all, number one, actually, we need to get as many of these photos in as many places as we possibly can. Second is we want to mainstream these conservation travel approaches in our work. So how do we just make this, as Nikki said, just part of how we do business? The best thing to do would be to be 10 years from now and not have to have a session on conservation travel. It's how we do business. The second thing is to support your conservation actions. So are there things that we can do at a global level that can help support your ideas and your investments and your hopes and aspirations and nurture even the craziest ideas about how we can sustain the resource? And third, and I think many of you will be happy to hear this, is that the reason I mentioned the brand of the panda is that that brand can reach a lot of outlets. It can reach a lot of people who want to go to see these places. And we intend to work closely with ATTA and with you to increase the demand for this kind of travel. And so we hope it's not just about changing the practices or improving our practices, doing the great things that you've been wanting and inspiring to do. We're going to continue to make sure it's really good business. And the future of adventure travel, and as Doyle said, the future of tourism has these kinds of principles and priorities. So with this partnership, with your innovations, with your ideas, we think that we can ensure a world where nature is thriving, where wildlife is worth more alive than dead, and nature can compete. So with that, I'm going to stop for a second. I have gone on for 15 minutes about the premise of conservation travel, but really, the real innovators are people like you guys, and we've specifically chosen Julian Matthews and Praveen Moman to talk to us about their examples. They've been in the trenches for a very long time, trying to find those connections between adventure travel, the tourism industry, and conservation. And we have a lot to learn from them. So I'm excited to look at 2 case studies. First, starting with Julian. Julian is an ex-safari company owner, leader. He has created a conservation initiative that's been, for the past 10 years, has been supporting one of the most treasured tourism assets in India, that of the tiger. The tiger, 100 years ago, there were 100,000 of them. Today, there are 3,200. Julian's work is actually making sure that in India, that holds half the remaining tigers in the world, that they have the freedom to roam, they have the ability to be protected and to grow their populations. And we're grateful for Julian and his work. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. That was fantastic and always rather scary when you come out with those kind of reports where we're at, because like you, I'm not a hell of a lot older than you, a little bit, but always terrifying to realize that in our lifetimes we've find ourselves that we've already lost 50%. I was lucky enough to be brought up in Africa, so know what was there, even when I was a youngster. But firstly, just quickly, thank you very much for inviting me. What a huge privilege to be here amongst a load of friends, colleagues, competitors, travel businesses. That's where I belong, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you, Doyle, for inviting me. What a great privilege. Now, what is TOFTigers? And many people ask about this. We're really a kind of business-to-business supply chain pressure group. We produce a thing called the Good Wildlife Travel Guide. In it is all our members, and we have about 200 members, inbound operators, DMCs, and lodges in India. And we also audit all the lodges so you guys can lessen your own business risks to make sure you're choosing the best lodges to use environmentally. So we audit them through a thing called the pug mark, and then we ask you guys who are going inbound to use that as one of your key requirements when asking for lodges on the ground, because they're the coalface. These guys can turn around a situation. And we have a problem in India, and that's why I started my organization. Now, I was asked by Doyle to come up with the economics. Now, like Jeff, I'm not a great economist. In fact, for 20 years, I was a tour operator like you. It was an excuse for a job, specifically, so I didn't have to talk about figures and revenue and all that horrible stuff, which I loathe. But anyway, I've come up with a few. So let me try and take you through it. I'm going to focus on one hell of a special cat, particularly, that we're going to talk about. So this is very much about the tiger economy. Now, you might have realized that the tiger's slightly morphed here, and that funny nose you saw on the previous slide is not quite what you thought it was. But we all remember here that, in fact, wildlife conservation is really about people management. And in India, you can imagine that's the big problem, is how to manage the extraordinary number of people that also not only want to see inside the park, but live outside the park. So really, and I've always said in India, one of the keys is not to call them field directors when they're in charge of a park, but let's try and call them people directors, because actually that's a better way of describing what their jobs are. Nature takes care of itself. It is amazing. I'm just going to put a little of what I do in context, because often people forget this. India is a continent. It's made up of 28 states, and it's got 850 dialects, it's got 27 official languages. It's one of the most biodiverse countries in the world, both culturally, historically. We all come from there, so we're told, from the Indus valleys. So it has this amazing, amazing history. But also, in more recent terms, it is where big game hunting and big game and the big five came from. I bet you few of you realize that actually in the time when the Brits were over there in the 18th century, we were doing the big five. In fact, they were hunting them, of course, but that was what was happening at the time. And in reality, I've always said India, which very seldom promotes anything other than a tiger, it's a big 8 destination. Africa doesn't have, and this is coming from an African here, guys, it doesn't have wolves, it doesn't have bears, and it doesn't have tigers, and it's got all the other 5 too. So actually, we've got a big 8 country, and we should never forget that. But it also has its problems, of course. It's got declining forests. It's actually got 300,000 square kilometers of forest that are still seen if you look at a Google map, but sadly, underneath it, the biodiversity has gone. Most of it's been overgrazed and taken out and extracted. So it has a problem, but it is, in the areas in which you operate, in which most travelers go, fantastic as a destination for wildlife. Now, I'm really going to concentrate on this one wonderful lady. She's called Machali, and Machali means fish in Hindi, and she was actually given that name by a BBC film crew. And she is an extraordinary character. She is really one of the great stars of tigers today in India. She's incredibly well documented through television programs and on a vast media. Her every day is kind of monitored and by the forest department. It's often reported down. Machali's had a good day. Machali's in trouble. Machali's been hurt, etc. But she is wild. She's out there. Thousands of people have seen her. She's had 9 cubs. All have survived to adulthood, and 2 have actually been transferred to a separate park called Sariska. Now, just quickly, who's been to India from here? Okay. Wow, that's a lot of people. Now, keep your hands up. Take the ones who've been to India, who've seen tigers. Okay, who went to India and didn't see tigers? Excellent, excellent. So they're still relatively elusive. Okay, Machali, not quite so. This is her home. She lives in Ranthambhore National Park, and I'm sure many of you probably went to Ranthambhore when you were there. It's a magnificent setting. It's quite reassuring to me because it used to be full of people. In fact, that ridgeline you see at the top, there's actually a fortress wall. And in fact, one of the great Mughals actually captured that fort a long time ago, 400 years ago now, and it's turned back into a wilderness. So there's hope that actually if we got rid of all the humans, nature would recover. We know that because they've seen it. Most of the parks in India originally were full of people, and now they're the wildernesses. So we know nature has the ability to restore itself. It's a hugely popular tourist destination. But who can guess? Give me one who's going to try how many pilgrims walk in and out of this park every year. Can anyone give me any guesses? Give me a shout. You obviously know something that you don't. Yeah, no, it's close. About 2.5 million people walk past this dear lady into her home, up into that fort every year, okay? And she has never touched one of them, okay? So you all hear a lot of scare stories about tigers, but actually, once they're used to it and are not scared of humans, they are magnificent creatures and are not scared of you. But we also get in that park a lot of wildlife too. That's us, good old humanity. It wants to come in, it wants to join it. There's endless film crews following it, they're photographers. And of course, today, the world's biggest domestic market. You know, you've got 1.3 billion people in India, all want to go and see a tiger. And how are we gonna do that? That is just a mother of a problem. It's not going to happen yet, but let me tell you, in 30, 40, 50 years, a huge amount of that population will want to go and see a tiger. So how can we use that power to change the world? That domestic market has been a huge change. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was first there, mainly foreigners were going into those parks. Today, 95% of domestic travelers. And that is different because they have a different approach, they have a different feeling about it, they're still in the infancy of tourism, so they've got nothing to compare their experiences they get. So there's a lot of education we need, and a lot of awareness to raise them. Now, because it's about economics, I'm going to start talking to you a little bit about economics. This is really based on Machali, okay? The glorious female there. Every person who goes into her park, there's a pretty damn good chance you'll see Machali and one of her siblings. Not siblings, I do apologize. One of her children in there. And in fact, one of her, T19 is Unis, we call her, is now the main taken over from her in her main territory, which is Zone 4 in Ranthambhore. Generally is paying about $8.11 per visit. So in fact, tourism my figures are slightly out of date now. 1998 to 2008, we had a number of visitors there, but we also raised about $500,000. So that works out at about $8 a visit, okay? Keep that in mind. We then had an estimated accommodation. The people coming to see her on the fringes, booked into hotels, and generally spent about $7.2 million every year in 2008. We estimated there was some direct income. There was income from guide fees. You've got to have vehicles to get you in. You have visits. You have souvenirs, all the different things. We reckon that also came to about $5.6 million. So this is all tourism that's happening on the outside of parks. This is an economy based on that female in that area, which is in the tourism zone in Ranthambhore. This is all direct income. So this is coming in. This is not the indirect. This is the direct income in the fringes of that park. So we estimated that every year about 13.26 million was being put together. So if we then take that a little bit further, and let's just concentrate quickly in terms of where that tourism is, because in reality, we had, 2 years ago, we had a tourism ban. I don't know if any of you remember it. How many of you were affected by the tourism ban and had to stall groups or had to charge extra prices or tell clients that they had to change? Okay, luckily that's all gone. But can you believe they thought tourism was killing tigers, okay? And that's what we had to fight. Many in the audience, Amit and various other Mandeep, all they're fighting for on tourism behalf, because we believe it's the most important thing that will save tigers. But we're actually only allowed, as part of Ranthambhore Tiger Reserve, that's all the green there, we're allowed in about 10% of the park. So actually what we see is about 10% of the park. Machali lives in that 10% of the park. Okay? So that's all we're seeing. And the reality is that's probably where the vast majority and the best tiger habitat is in Ranthambhore. In fact, the far right-hand side, the Kaladevi Sanctuary there's only one tiger and the rest of it. So we're doing something right in terms of tourism already. My view is we've got to spread it further and thinner. So the reality then, let's look at Machali again. Let's come back to her, that famous tigress. She had, during her stay as the prime female in the prime area of the park, about 400,000 visitors went to see her. We reckon about 50%, and I'm sorry most of you in the other 50% probably saw her, and or saw one of her cubs, or indeed her now adult family. And so we reckoned in that dear old Machali, can you believe this? One tigress was worth, in the 10 years that she dominated that territory, she was worth, in direct revenue, $100 million. Okay? $100 million. That is a hell of a lot. Now, that is going into local businesses, it is going into protection, it's going into government in terms of taxes, it's going into communities, it's going into jobs, all those different elements. So we gave Machali a Lifetime Achievement Award. Now, she wouldn't have known about this, don't forget. But we thought we'd give her a samba dare, her favorite meal, as part of it. And admittedly, that now sits in the field director's office. She hasn't chewed on it or anything yet, but we thought it was worthy. She is the Richard Branson. Whoever creates the Sachin Tendulkar, if any of you know about cricket, and there are probably not all that many that do. The Sachin Tendulkar of India, as far as tigers are concerned. Tremendous. What she's been generating. But let's not fool ourselves. So what does it cost to keep her in that habitat? It costs, we reckon, between $900 and $2,000 per square kilometer. And I would love to know if any of you have any other ideas of what it costs in your own areas, because it'd be good to compare. But Machali herself lives in 10 square kilometers of that. So her protection costs are about $20,000 per annum. That's just for her, and of course there'd be another 18. In fact, there are 43 tigers now, we believe, in Ranthambhore. It's never been so full. But actually, for Machali, over the decade in which you got that figure of 100 million, she would have cost the park services somewhere in the region of $200,000. Now, look at that for a rate of return on investment. Guys, wouldn't anyone want to have tigers in their park? You know, we talk about put a tiger in your tank. Solid. Put a tiger in a park. It really works wonders for tourism. So there we have it. It's something that Warren Buffett wouldn't be able to get that kind of return from any of his investments. Okay, amazing what this. Now, we also know that tigers themselves are the most popular animal on the planet. Ask a kid to tell you what is its most favorite animal. Guess what? It's a tiger. Nat Geo statistics tell me that their website, they get more hits for tigers, 4 times more hits for the word tiger on their website than any other animal. And guess what? The next one is elephant, so I'm told. So, how much of this goes back into direct conservation? Well, luckily, and it's only till relatively recently, the vast majority of your park fees does go back into a tiger trust. About 1.2 million went back into Ranthambhore's Tiger Foundation this year. But amazing enough, we think of the federal bodies, Project Tiger is this fantastic body that looks after tigers, and you know what? It has done a pretty damn good job. It doesn't get tourism, my problem, but it's done a pretty good job in many ways. But the reality, it only gives a third of that amount that tourism is giving to the park from its own budget. So actually relatively small numbers here. And you would recognize these as relatively small numbers to hold a tiger reserve. You know, £492,000 a year to keep Ranthambhore safe. It's a relatively small amount of money. But actually tourism's added, twice more on top of that from its allocation. So it is doing something. Now, there is a different cost, and of course you and I know it in terms of what's happening, and one of the reasons I got involved in it was because a lot of what is happening in terms of nature tourism was unsustainable. There was building of lodges, there was terrible infrastructure, there was closing of corridors, all these sort of things that should never be happening with well-planned nature tourism, as Namibia is such a fantastic example of it. Plan it before it arrives. It's no use planning it after it arrives. So we know all the sort of downsides of it. But you know what? It also, Machali, she employs 3,863 people directly. Not indirectly, directly. She doesn't know it. Again, the great CEO of Tigers, she does. But actually, she's doing a damn good job of employing people. But there's also a reality with what's happening in India. And this is where I come in and where many of my colleagues, and indeed you come in too. Because here's Corbett Tiger Reserve, another very famous park in India. In fact, one of the first Project Tiger Reserves, one of the first parks named after Jim Corbett. And the reality is that we've got these terrible sort of issues here with infrastructure beginning to close off corridors because there's too much development. We've got lots and lots of lodges all sort of circumventing all these different areas and potentially beginning to affect tourism. Now, this one's always a sort of terrible test case for us in TOFTigers because well, look what's happened to Corbett. It's all gone wrong, and there's too much building, and there's now 200 lodges, and everyone's partying, and the noise is affecting. You know what? It's not what I like, but if you look what's actually happening here with tourism, guess which bar on that area is Corbett with the highest density of tigers in India? That one there, that's Corbett, 30 tigers per 100 square kilometers. So the reality is that so many people are benefiting that actually it's keeping a lot of tigers safe. So if we plan it that little bit better, before all that tourism starts, and stop building in certain areas and build carefully in other areas, we can do a fantastic job. And we can double the numbers that double. We can triple them, we can quadruple them, using that one thing, which is you guys and nature tourism and adventure tourism. So it's not impossible. So the reality, and we get shot down with this on so often, tourism is affecting tigers. And from my perspective, I don't always want to see tigers. And in fact, I very seldom want to see tigers. I want to see them by myself. I want to be there in that wilderness. I want to do all that. But you know what? For the tiger, the reality is he's used to all those vehicles going around in bits and pieces. And I'm not saying we shouldn't control it. We have to and all that stuff. But you know what? I reckon some of those parks could have 3 times as much tourism, and they would still carry on breeding. Let's not forget that the tiger has only come out into daylight because he feels comfortable in daylight. So the reality is he's not being affected, and there was proof from WII, the Wildlife Institute of India, itself. So we're nearly there. So the question really is, how can we now, as nature and nature tourism, affect the transformation from a kind of extractive tourism to a proactive tourism, to a conservation travel that Jeff so passionately spoke about. And we really have to go there. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jules. Next, we're going to continue to see some real on-the-ground examples from Praveen Moman, who is originally from the UK, but has spent most of his his career working to conserve the great apes of the Congo Basin. And he has used tourism as a means to do that, and his support for local communities. Been considered one of the top 25 conservation philanthropists in the whole continent, and has really set a whole new standard for how to do conservation travel, how to give back, how to support local communities in conservation, and in the process, benefit the business as well. So Praveen.
There is still a strong place in my heart for this area, and that's an inspiration I originally got from my father, who loved the adventure in Africa, and that's what drew me back. Our lodges are what we describe as eco-luxury lodges that are very comfortable and elegant and stylish, but in context and are as eco-friendly as possible. This area of Africa has these tremendously beautiful forests, and we're giving you, in a way, a very special insight into this hidden world of the apes and how they interact with the humans that live around their forests.
Tracking gorillas and golden monkeys is a very beautiful experience.
You see this wildlife in the nature, which is really amazing experience that you can't have anywhere else.
We specialize in safaris to take people to see gorillas and chimpanzees, but not only do we do that, the safaris connect our guests to various projects that we run that are connected to conservation and communities.
For every client who books a full safari, Volcanoes then donates to the nonprofit section of the company, which then allows us to create all these projects. And that allows people then to know their safari is giving back directly to the community.
I enjoy meeting so many people from all over the world and showing them around, telling them my culture, showing them the wildlife. It really excites me. I feel privileged to work with Volcanoes.
We all go to faraway places in search of something magical, in search of ourselves. But to me, the essence is the connection with the people. It's a sharing experience. You're sharing your common humanity, your common life. It's sharing the most special part of Africa.
Thank you very much. As you leave the room, you'll be asked for your credit card numbers, so please have it ready. So there you've seen the schmaltz. You've seen kind of the, what we portray to the punter, if you like, to the client. How does this work? What is it about? The ATTA, which I've been involved in for a number of years now, not quite to get my 10th anniversary bottle, I'm sorry to say. But it seems like a very long time. And I'm so pleased to be at Summit and so pleased that so many of you who are here for the first time. I understand about 50% of participants are new, and I think that's wonderful. And I think it's such an amazing tribe, and it has helped so many businesses and so many people. So please do stick with us, and I think you'll learn a lot. So how did I get involved in this story? Well, as you heard, I was born in this weird place called Uganda for a variety of reasons. And that, of course, connects, if you look at this map, in this funny way, East and Central Africa. Normally, of course, we don't hear much about Central Africa because nobody goes there. That's where the Congo Basin is. It's the lung of Africa, the second largest forest of Africa, second largest forest of the world, and of course, one of the most threatened. And in it, you have the great ape species of Africa. 4 out of the 5 great ape species of the world, as you know, live here. The orangutan, of course, lives in the other end of the world. How it got there, I don't know. But these 4 species are kind of interesting: the mountain gorilla, the eastern lowland gorilla, the chimpanzee, and the bonobo. And in the forest, you have these amazing salines, as they call them in French, or bais, as they call them in the languages of West Africa, where you get these forest elephants. You get the bonobo, you get the gorilla, the brown gorilla that you see in most zoos. And these are areas that most people never see, because tourism has never managed to be developed here. The chimp, of course, is the only great ape that straddles East and Central Africa. The mountain gorilla, we all know. And it's worked for a variety of reasons. It's been easy to habituate. It's not skittish like the brown gorilla, like the western lowland gorilla. It's very lazy. It sits in the forest the whole time with its extended family watching television. So it's always there. It's a product really made for tourism. Of course, the population is very, very low now. It's about 900 individuals in the whole world living on the Rwanda, Uganda, and Congo border. And it's a dream product for many people. I don't know how many people in this room have seen gorillas. Not many. Oh, well, that's a lot of credit cards coming our way then. But many people say, to be serious, it's a life-changing experience because, of course, the gorillas and the great apes as a whole are our ancestors, are our cousins. And seeing them is a very, very wonderful experience that does make you think about who you are and where you've come from. Ecotourism, of course, as a whole, these figures are taken from GRASP, the United Nations Organization for Great Ape Protection, on which we are one of the signatory bodies. There was the signing of the Kinshasa Declaration in 2005. And since then, we've been heavily involved in trying to do what we can as a company to see what can be done about the great apes. But on the one hand, ecotourism is growing. There's these figures of billions and all this stuff that's around. And this is the startling figure that follows on from Hefe's figure, that about 10% of habitat in Africa will remain undisturbed. And the orang, of course, is facing serious challenges in a big way because of palm oil. And just like the tiger that Jules pointed out, the Ugandan gorilla is worth something. But most of the time, and the Rwandese gorilla as well, and the Congolese gorilla, in tourism, this is what its estimate is, about $1 million. It's amazing with the Machali Economics, you're talking about 100. So I don't know where the figures differ. At the same time, if you want to buy a live chimpanzee or an orangutan, these are the figures the market can find for you. And then, of course, there's the price of bushmeat, which I'm not going to go into today, because bushmeat, of course, is widely sold in Western Africa and Central Africa, not so much in East Africa. This is an estimate of the tourism employment in Rwanda, largely centered on the gorilla population. And the gorillas, of course, have been there a long time. As you know, Dian Fossey worked there in the 60s and 70s. But then the civil war happened in Rwanda, the genocide, things stopped. So it's only in the last 10 years that things have started to move on again. And the population of gorillas is safeguarded in all countries. The clients' number is increasing all the time, and so is the revenue. And then a certain amount of the gorilla tourism, of the gorilla permit that clients buy, goes back into community projects. So these are the statistics the Rwandese government has of what's been given in the last few years. So how does a company like Volcanoes fit into this? Well, because I was connected to this area, one day I decided, well, I needed a challenge. So I thought I'd go and capture, the great apes of Africa and create a safari business. I'm not sure it was such a wise choice, but that's another story. But many of you are involved in conservation travel, and you know why you were involved in conservation travel. The gorillas live in the most beautiful part of Africa, in my opinion, but also the most challenging part of Africa. They live on the border of Uganda, Rwanda, and the DRC, and this was our reality in 1997. The genocide ended in 1994, as you know, and things were still rather, let's say, changeable in the area. And there was a lot of activity, as they say in American, in the border areas. So you had the post-conflict realities, society's not working, people really having a very, very tough time, and a huge population, a refugee population, and of course little tourism, infrastructure, and skills, which is the reverse of what you actually need, of course, for baseline, for conservation travel. As you all know, you need to fulfill a whole series of things. You need to have, of course, a product and an experience, and you need to get there, and you need to have companies who supply it, and parks that function, and marketing, and supportive policies from governments and others. And of course, you need capacity, none of which you have after a war. So it was a very tough time, but we got started. And then you begin to think about what you're selling and why. And this is a definition I came up with some years ago of what is a world-class product. Because of course, the mountain gorilla is to many people a world-class product. But it's not enough just to define it for yourself. You've got to deliver it. You've got to be able to bottle it in a way and sell it like Disney effectively sells its products. And when we started in Rwanda, shortly after that, we got involved in putting together a project to build together the basic infrastructure and revive tourism. We took in the conservation organizations in these communities and the local private sector to build a series of things, which I'm not going to discuss in detail, around the Gorilla Park of Rwanda. It was a small-scale project, but every partner contributed. And that's what helped revive tourism in Rwanda, in gorilla tourism, that is. And that's what set the basis so that the private sector, the government, the donors, the different organizations can take it forward. And that's when we built our lodge called Virunga Lodge, not far from the Great Ape Park. And of course, you have to have teams of people who you have to train, and you have to make sure that they can provide facilities to a Western standard. And of course, we have a whole series of community projects that we talked about before. Well, in looking at 2 or 3 summing up aspects related to this theme that we're discussing today, investment, of course, is the key. And the investment can be from governments, from donors, from conservation organizations, and most of all from the private sector. Sometimes the private sector in the great ape world is like the missing link. People just assume that tourism and conservation can happen without the private sector. And I think that's a great mistake. Economic development requires the private sector to be involved. And conservation, too, must create investment. Conservation must pay if oil and logging and mining are not to take over. And this is the key that we have to all understand today. Communities need the meat on the table. And whether it's bushmeat or whether it's beef, they don't care. They must eat. And the great apes of Africa or the other wildlife must help in some way give them an income. So this whole business of how you invest first and then how you have maximum impact, well, it does require the whole supply chain to work collectively and work effectively. And this also links to what I said about this project that we did some years ago, about how you do need more public-private partnerships, linking the conservation world, linking nonprofits to the for-profit sector. Conservation travel, as we know, is a very precarious and marginal industry in many ways. And sometimes the private sector ends up bearing a lot of the costs and a lot of the issues that hold it back. And more PPPs, in my opinion, will help tackle this problem, which I hope we can discuss later this week. In influence terms, therefore, given that conservation travel is complex and marginal, and has the poor communities on the one hand, the fragile ecosystems on the other, and the threatened species, we need to find, as I've said, ways of linking this together, ways of finding way of mining tourism, if you like, mining conservation travel, so that it is a competitor to the extractive industries. And this, of course, requires a very strong collaborative advocacy. And I'm very happy that we are going to be shortly signing this memo between the ATTA and the WWF. I think it's a fantastic opportunity to take this forward. In closing, I'd like to offer 1 or 2 comments. Wilderness or wildness is a mystique, a religion, an intense philosophy, a dream of ideal society that brings a unique contribution to the democratic idea. This amazing quote I found from Ansel Adams, who many of you will know, who was a master landscape photographer and a passionate national park defender. And he wrote this about 100 years ago in an essay that he published with his fantastic pictures. And this is a romantic dream that many of us will have been brought up with. That's how we first got involved in landscapes, with wildlife, with ecosystems, with conservation. This is a romantic dream that's not enough today. And that's what I would urge everybody in this room. And I think it's a wonderful thing that WWF and ATT are promoting this, that we've got to turn this romantic dream into reality. Otherwise, conservation travel will not be able to support the threatened ecosystems of the world. Already we've heard how many species we are losing. So conservation travel is one of the key ways of trying to make sure that we do something about the species. But it's a very tough challenge, as we all know. Many of you work in it. It's often marginal as a business. It's fragile in terms of ecosystems and species, and it's difficult to connect, and it's often in politically complex areas. Just as a small example, when I started Volcanoes in Uganda and Rwanda, on the border of the Democratic Republic of Congo, I effectively took on 3 tigers in the sense of riding these 3 very complex countries. I had to live through 2 official wars, several rebel groups, instability, refugees, the El Nino floods, Ebola, and guerrillas disappearing across borders. Quite simple, really, if you look at the equation. So it's something that, you either decide to do and you want to do and you believe in it, but it is something that is challenging and needs a lot of support from all of us, and that goes back to the theme of influence. It needs all of us to understand that doing a business plan or building and managing and delivering and sustaining a quality hospitality service halfway up a mountain is a very tough business. A 10-room lodge is more complex than a 100-room hotel run according to Swiss hôtellerie models. So this, my colleagues, my friends, this is our challenge that we have. If we don't have tourism to these areas, if we don't have conservation travel, I don't think the species will survive. If we have too much tourism, as we've seen in the tiger example, that can also destroy ecosystems and species. So in summing up, I would just urge everybody to do their best to make sure that we have enough investment in conservation travel, enough impact, enough influence. And I do hope this ATTA WWF memo will take us forward. Thank you very much.
See, is this working? I'm excited now to ask Doyle and Jason Reckers, who's the acting president for ATTA, and Doyle, the executive director for ATTA in Europe, to come up, and then Jim Sano, who is the vice president for conservation, travel, and tourism at WWF. And invite them to share a few words and for us to get this thing on and sign this MOU.
Thank you, Jefe and Jim. So I just wanted to say a couple quick things. Sustaining the natural and cultural resources travelers want to see is essential to the industry. We recognize that now, more than ever, is the time to energize this effort with WWF. I remember starting this conversation in 2011 at the summit in Chiapas when Doyle came up to me and was telling me about a conversation he was having with WWF on ways that we could work together more. And to say the least, I was really excited to hear that. It was an opportunity for us to do more work with a large organization that has a lot of big footprint and an opportunity for us to really make a change. That growing relationship continued in Lucerne, Switzerland, when WWF's Director General was a speaker there. And as Jefe said, in Namibia last year, where we saw up close what conservation travel really looks like. Over the last year, we've worked to define a clearer picture of our potential collaboration together, which has resulted in this MOU that we'll sign today. We're proud of this moment and look forward to working with WWF on projects to help all of us sustain the resources that make up the experiences all of you deliver. So thank you.
The seed of this idea indeed started in Chiapas, and I wanted to give a shout out to Keith Sproul, who's in the audience someplace. If he would stand up. Great. He led a delegation from Namibia and really planted the seed in my mind for this collaboration with ATTA. And so you might ask the question, why ATTA? And I think in our minds, it is the perfect community because you're really the early adopters, as I like to say, in moving this idea forward. And really, we see the potential for you all to set an example for the entire travel industry. So it is with great honor on behalf of my colleagues at WWF and all protocols observed, of course, to be able to sign this MOU. Thank you.
Just one brief comment is anything worthwhile takes time, and that is what we learned in Namibia in particular. It took about 20-some years to get that country to see the results that it's seeing now. So patience, persistence, all the way through. This is going to take decades for us to accomplish, so stick with it.